Permaculture design is based on a series of principles, all of which are derived from nature, the classroom I was talking to you about. And with those lessons learned, we begin to plant out our own food forest, a yielding, bearing, productive system that mimics the diversity, resiliency, and complexity of natural systems. What am I talking about? Well, for example, right here, we see, and I got my handy machete nearby to show you, how we work one of these systems. Nature teaches us that there's several levels or layers in a forest. That's what we have going here. They're not competing with one another, contrary to what we've been taught. They're working synergistically in a guild. So I have my principal fruit trees, lower growing bushes that occupy different niches, and my fertility, my compost, if you will, right at the feet of these plants. So rather than make big piles of compost and such, this is the extent of my work. Chop and drop with a good old machete. My fertility growing right next to the plant, which minimizes the work, maximizes the fertility. At the end of it, you end up, if you're lucky, with beautiful fruit-bearing trees that are going to be here for generations in a system that is largely self-sustaining. Pretty cool, huh? Earlier I said that the existing forest is our blueprint, our model. This young nascent food forest is the classroom. You see, I've learned two valuable lessons from my Australian friends. The first is, that's a knife. The second is, in my analytical North American way, I was trying to figure out which plants to put with which other ones into the perfect guild. What they taught me is, look, here's how we do it, right? We plant out everything, we walk away from it, come back in a few years, and we choose the winners. So that's what I've done. Willy-nilly planted all manner of things, occupying all different niches or stories or layers of a forest, you see. I've got nitrogen-fixing ground cover of clover. I've got plants that bring in beneficial bugs, that repel the pests. And what I'm aiming for is to mimic the diversity, resiliency, and complexity of a natural forest system. Because what they taught me over there too is, right, it is precisely that diversity and that complexity that gives it its resiliency. That's how you get it done, mate. Earthworks, earth repair, water management, these are big, broad subjects. Put simply, permaculture says where the water runs, we want to make it walk. Something I had to do. You see, this whole design was motivated by water. First year I moved here, I got flooded, but completely. And that explains what you're looking at here, this squiggly mound of dirt called a burn. It looks naturalized, doesn't look like much, but this is working to catch all that water, spread it, turn it to productive purpose for generations to come. A waste becomes a resource. A problem becomes a solution. Let me show you how I do that. In order to accomplish this earth repair and these earthworks, you got to have a real sensitivity to what's going on in the ground, the contour lines, how the water's moving exactly. To do that, you use this trusty old A-frame. Very simple tool, but has profound results. Think of the rice paddies of Asia and the precision of that work. Very simply, when one leg is level with the other, the plumb bob is dead middle, so I know it's level. So I spin it around, get my level, spin it around the other way, get my level there. Next thing I know, exactly where the contour line is. And that's why this mound of dirt is laid out the way it is. You see, that water that was a problem now becomes a solution. It gets to spread this entire width, percolate into the ground. What if there's too much water? That's where you release it. This is a spillway. Again, it's the opposite of what we've been taught. Typically, we say it's a waste to be gotten rid of efficiently by putting it into pipes and narrowing it and giving it its erosive force. Here it's the opposite. It's like water cascading over an overfull bathtub in a thin, wide sheet. And that water goes on to the next part of the system and the next part of the system and so on. Where the water runs, we make it walk for our benefit. Let me show you. So the water released from the last system goes where? Here. A ditch that doesn't drain. It's called a swale. Unlike our berm,
The downward side of the swale is uncompacted. It captures all of the surface water, dispersing it evenly and allowing it to slowly filter into the ground. We heavily mulch these swales, making them the planting areas in our living landscape. These water harvesting ditches, cut on contour, are an amazingly simple but effective permaculture strategy that turns a problem into a solution. Would you believe that some 50% of all residential water use is for landscaping? Even harder to believe, there are 20 times more pesticides per acre on American lawns than on all the farms. And most of that fertilizer ends up as runoff. Now remember, when I moved to my property, my perceived problem was excess runoff.
And where does it all go? Into the lake. Here's a system that catches all that, turns it into a solution. That water then travels in here, should it ever overflow. Remember the spillway I showed you? There's another spillway here. Where does it go from there? Let me show you. Water comes out and goes into this pond structure I've created, which of course then flows downhill from there. And I love showing people this pond because there's so much life going on in here. Little trick on how to get these ponds working with no chemicals, no filters, no pumps. See, it's not just a typical round pond. It's got these shapes to it, creating more edge. The pond itself has edge. It's not just a saucer-like bowl. It actually has different levels, ridges, and layers. Different species occupy different niches. So by providing this edge, we create ever more of an ecosystem. One thing I could do to improve the functioning of this pond would be to provide some windbreak from the ferocious southern winds I keep getting, like today, for example. Typically, what would we do? Put up a fence. Permaculture principle says that each important element should serve multiple functions. So why not make this a living fence, providing the functions of food, fiber, fuel, forage, windbreak, habitat? All that's possible. There's a really good example of what I'm talking about over at Elmore Roots Nursery where I buy my fruit trees.
Dave Freed has been developing the Elmore Roots Nursery for the past 28 years. He's a master at propagating fruit trees, stacking functions, and creating productive ecologies. The first thing I wanted to see was his version of a living fence.
So this is what my system could look like in a couple of years now that it's all planted out. You don't even recognize it in the landscape. It looks so naturalized. But this is your living fence.
That's it. This is the place that you can grow plants instead of putting up an ugly fence.
Right.
This is a Jerusalem artichoke, the fastest growing thing you could plant. Gets to about 6 feet right away.
Right.
They have a chocolate scent.
Really?
They make roots that you can eat, edible tubers, and they give the first 6 feet of a privacy hedge. Then, just above them, we have hazelnuts. Really nice fall color, edible nuts.
And you have apples, and you have oaks, and you have all this growing in this concentrated area. So this is the permaculture concept of multiple yields and multiple functions. In this small area, you have the radiant heat off this gravel, off this wall, aiding these plants to grow.
And look how thick it is. You can't even see through to the neighbors. Here, it's not developed yet. You can see right through.
So just that thin line of plantings makes a complete privacy hedge.
That's
But
right.
way beyond that, you got this permaculture concept of these stacked functions and these multiple functions and these multiple yields. Win-win.
Yes.
I love it.